The salt air hangs heavy over the white sands of Horn Island. It is 4:31 in the afternoon on July 4th. A single boat engine rips through the silence. It carves a physical wake across the dark water, heading back to the Mississippi mainland. Young men sit in the hull, but Nolan Wells is not one of them. According to classified marine tracking data, for the next 13 hours, complete silence falls over the Gulf Coast. No emergency dispatch, no Coast Guard deployment, no frantic calls to the mother of Nolan Wells, just a total and calculated blackout of information. I possess a forensic behavioral timeline that reconstructs exactly what happened inside those 13 missing hours. But there is a specific digital artifact, a forensic anomaly recovered from the shadow data of this investigation that I can only show you at the very end of this video. Because once you see how this silence was weaponized, you are forced to ask a terrifying question. What exactly were they wiping away in the dark? Deep inside the behavioral analysis manuals used by federal profilers, there is a chapter on biological panic. When a sudden disappearance occurs, adrenaline floods the veins. Voices shatter. The brain begs for rescue. But look at the clinical footprint left behind by the friends of Nolan Wells. That natural biological fracture never happened. Frame this historical context in your mind as a meticulously orchestrated operation. Notice the absolute rigidity of their timeline. When a group of individuals experiences a traumatic anomaly without preparation, their stories naturally splinter. Details clash, timelines blur. But here, the narrative was perfectly synchronized from the moment the boat docked. This was not the chaotic aftermath of an accident. This was a 13-hour prisoner's dilemma. A closed-room psychological war where 4 individuals deliberately isolated themselves to align their memories before the sun came up. You are now holding exclusive intelligence on the most chilling behavioral cover-up of the decade, and it starts with a single, perfectly timed lie. Buried deep within the redacted radio dispatch logs, an anomaly emerges. At exactly 3:00 in the afternoon, a distress transmission echoes over the frequency, a failing bilge pump, a vessel taking on salt water. It is the perfect mechanical alibi. The mainstream media swallowed the image of panicked teenagers fighting a sinking boat. It builds the tension perfectly for the general public. But right as that tension peaks, you must understand the forensic twist. The mechanical failure on that boat was not the catalyst for a tragedy. It was a highly calculated chronological shield designed to hide what was truly happening on that beach. This engineered emergency provided the ultimate cover. It gave the friends of Nolan Wells a verifiable, documented reason to flee Horn Island in a frantic hurry. It justified their chaotic departure, but more importantly, it birthed a shadow window. By establishing a mechanical emergency at exactly 3:00, they successfully engineered a blind spot. 90 minutes of entirely untracked time on Horn Island before the boat finally departed at 4:31. No cameras, no digital pings, just isolated shoreline. That 90-minute gap is ground zero, holding a secret so radioactive that the individuals involved spent the rest of the night trying to incinerate it. Once the vessel touched the safety of the mainland docks, the operation shifted from physical distancing into a protocol known as total digital sanitization. Welcome to the frantic scrubbing of the digital inferno. Nolan Wells was a highly active teenager. He documented his life with relentless consistency. Yet in the critical hours following his separation from his friends, his smartphone went entirely dark. When the mother of Nolan Wells tracked his device using a family location application, it pinged safely on land. But when independent extraction teams checked the location metadata through Snapchat, the data contradicted the first reading entirely. A total spatial misalignment. His physical body vanished, while his digital footprint remained safely on shore. But when investigators finally breached the shadow data of that device, they did not find a dead battery. They found a deliberate, terrifying void. Both Snapchat accounts belonging to Nolan Wells were completely hollowed out. Understand the clinical psychology required for this action. Scrubbing social media is not a reflexive biological response to shock. It requires steady hands. It requires deliberate keystrokes, navigating menus, confirming permanent deletion. That is the behavior of individuals neutralizing digital evidence. No saved images from Horn Island, no final videos, no proof that July 4th ever happened. This was not a panic response. This was a targeted digital neutralization, leaving behind a psychological tell so loud that federal profilers could hear it from 1,000 miles away. Extracted from the peripheral witness testimonies, a single detail breaks the entire case wide open. Open-source intelligence analysts are studying the exact psychology of the 13-hour blackout. The car keys belonging to Nolan Wells were not lost to the tides of the Gulf Coast. The keys belonging to Nolan Wells were found resting casually on top of an Xbox gaming console inside a private residence, guarded by a wall of absolute silence. Placing the keys of a missing teenager on top of a video game machine reveals a catastrophic lack of empathy. Behavioral experts define this as guilty knowledge. They already knew Nolan Wells was never coming back to claim those keys, but we are left wondering who exactly told them to keep quiet. Every airtight isolation chamber eventually springs a leak. The impenetrable narrative crafted by the friends of Nolan Wells was just shattered by an independent variable they could not control. A young woman named Katie finally breaks her silence, shifting this story from a simple holiday tragedy into an all-out forensic war. The friends of Nolan Wells told investigators that he explicitly chose to remain on the beach. They swore he wanted to be left behind. But submerged within a private confrontation, Katie sat face-to-face with the mother of Nolan Wells and detonated their entire alibi. Katie confirmed that Nolan Wells told her directly that he was heading back to board the boat with his friends. Two entirely conflicting realities. One massive forensic lie, forcing us to ask what actually intercepted him before he reached the water. This is exactly where the localized blackout transforms into a systemic blacklist. As the forensic inconsistencies multiplied, a total career execution and secret isolation protocol was activated across Mississippi. High-powered figures descended into the arena to manage the fallout. The district attorney of Jackson County dropped a suffocating gag order over the entire investigation. Every investigating agency was muzzled. The official autopsy of Nolan Wells was sealed, locked away in state vaults, hidden directly from his grieving parents. The case was quietly pushed into the shadows of a secret grand jury, a highly classified legal dimension where evidence is totally controlled, leaving us to wonder who is truly pulling the strings from the dark. The atmosphere surrounding Horn Island right now feels apocalyptic. A teenager vanishes, and suddenly the full crushing weight of the local justice system is weaponized to manage the narrative. Lawyers scramble, injunctions are drafted, political wealth moves in the shadows. As this exact breakdown goes live, immense pressure is being exerted by influential families to have these specific forensic timelines erased entirely, meaning you must absorb this classified artifact before the internet is forced to scrub it clean. You have waited for the classified artifact promised at the start of this infiltration, the missing link that explains why 13 hours of silence and a wiped smartphone were absolutely required. We must completely bypass the sealed state autopsy and look directly at the independent medical examination conducted by Dr. Roger Mitchell. When the independent pathologist analyzed the physical remains of Nolan Wells, he uncovered a localized anomaly that permanently incinerates the accidental drowning theory. There was a distinct red discoloration deep within the soft tissue at the back of the head, highly localized blunt force trauma to the occipital region, a physical impact that the state desperately tried to hide, leading us to the most chilling forensic obstruction tactic ever deployed in a modern investigation. The true horror is what was missing from the examination table. The Jackson County medical examiner had already harvested the internal neck structures and vital organs of Nolan Wells during the initial procedure. They were never returned. The physical evidence vanished. This is a known forensic obstruction tactic. By withholding the biological mechanics of the fatal event, the state ensured the independent pathologist could never fully map the trauma, begging the question of what those missing organs would have ultimately proved. Connect every single forensic dot right now. The 90-minute shadow window on Horn Island, the engineered mechanical decoy of the bilge pump, the 13-hour delay before contacting authorities, the surgically wiped Snapchat accounts, the keys resting on a gaming console, the shattered alibi from Katie, and the unexplained blunt force trauma obscured by a sealed state autopsy. This was not an accidental drowning. This was a highly localized fatal event requiring a massive coordinated extraction to cover up, revealing an infinite loop that is far more terrifying than the crime itself. The teenagers on that boat did not possess the political capital to seal a state autopsy. The friends of Nolan Wells did not wield the authority to muzzle the Jackson County Sheriff Department. The 13-hour blackout was merely the outer shell, a decoy. The friends bought the time, but a completely different global power player stepped in to finish the job. A localized network of judicial influence and systemic protection hijacked the narrative, proving that the silence of 4 young men was instantly backed by the silence of an entire legal system. But we have yet to discover who is the actual architect of this machine. We are standing at the absolute edge of a polarizing reality, and the algorithm of justice requires you to choose a side. Look closely at the raw forensic evidence and the 13 hours of orchestrated deception. Are the friends of Nolan Wells the ultimate masterminds who flawlessly executed this blackout? Or are they just expendable pawns being manipulated by a much darker, much more powerful syndicate that protects its own reputation at all costs? I need you to comment your exact verdict below right now, because I am pulling the most highly detailed forensic theories for part 2, and you need to decide if you are ready to see how deep this corruption really goes.